Welcome back, players. I'm Jack with 36 Cancel, and this is Coco the Wise Cat. Goblin Slayer has just dropped like a 2-ton slab of concrete into an undisturbed underground lake. There were case openings all over the place, and people are falling head over heels trying to adapt this set for the English meta. Because here's the thing about Goblin Slayer. Sure, you have your deck staples and extremely obvious 4-ofs, but there are a lot more open ends than you'd imagine for a set that's so dominant. So where do we go after we gathered our playsets? Well, honestly, I still don't know. I've actually been sitting at my table building, testing, listening to, reading, and watching a lot of Goblin Slayer theory, and I'm still workshopping my red and blue decks. Don't worry, I'll be done soon. But for now, I want to open the gate on Goblin Slayer by taking a less complicated but no less interesting flavor deck. The real Adventure Time deck, or Mono Yellow Goblin Slayer. So in the show, Goblin Slayer had a small entourage. While Priestess is blue and Goblin Slayer himself is red, the rest of his party is yellow. So the Drunken Dwarf, Potato Elf, and Mark Zuckerburg are all in yellow, and this is their deck. It's a bit strange to think that there's a whole deck dedicated to only the secondary cast of the party, but when you think about how different this trio is from our two main characters and how differently they fight, it makes more sense. These guys are adventurers, looking for quests, clearing dungeons, and seeking treasure, so they've got their own suite of unique cards that make quite the interesting deck. Now, like a lot of secondary cast or enemy faction decks, the card pool for them is significantly smaller than the rest. The yellow deck is almost all 4-ofs, and it's mostly the yellow rares and double rares in the set. But it's not totally closed though. There are definitely decisions to make and flexible spots to tech. So without further ado, here's my hot take. As you can see, lots of 4-ofs, especially at level 0, which is where we'll begin. 16 zeros, 4 different cards. It almost doesn't get any simpler. First up, and our favorite opener, we have Envy for the Unknown High Elf Archer. She's a 1500 free runner with the Bath Time Asana effect. When she attacks, you can shuffle 2 characters back into your deck from your waiting room, and if you do, she gets +1 soul until the end of turn. She's a combination of 2 really good effects. She can stick around multiple turns by running, and she can shuffle what we need back into our deck, especially soul triggers, which, as we'll learn later, is an important part of the deck. Second, we've got Cherished Flavor Mark Zuckerburg. This 4-off slot is a bit down to preference, and this ended up being my choice. When he comes in, you mill 2, and if you hit a climax, he gets +2 soul. So this deck already has a lot of plus soul action, and then, when he comes in, you can choose a card in your hand and put it into your stock. Now the top end of this deck is really stock heavy, so this helps us out with that, and having Mr. Zuckerburg on the stage is important, as we'll see when we move on. And move forward we will, with another Alien Lizard Man social media mogul. He gives all your characters called Dragon Tooth Warrior plus 2000 power, which is a level 2 we run in our deck. And when he comes in, you can clock yourself to salvage a 1-0 event called Dragon Bones. Fun fact, Dragon Bones lets you play the 2-1 Dragon Tooth Warrior from your hand at level 1. So it's a neat little combo that lets you put out a 2-1 10-5 at level 1 for free, 8-5 without Miracle of Ancestors, or 12-5 if you manage to have 2 of them on the stage. Now this whole package constitutes what's probably the biggest choice you're making when you build your own adventurer deck, and it's definitely flavor over function. You can either run that set of 3 cards, Dragon Tooth Warrior, Miracle of Ancestors, and Dragon Bones, or opt toward a more different strategy. Both have pros and cons, but I've opted for this because frankly, I like how gimmicky it is. But before we move on to how this affects our later game, there's one more level 0 to go over. Inquiry About a Warrior High Elf is our resident brainstormer. She's one of those special brainstormers though. You tap 2, mill 6, and if you hit a shot climax, you get to salvage a character. I should mention that every climax in this deck is a shot. Now, you can't hit multiple targets with this brainstormer, which kind of sucks, but she mills through your deck faster, and your chances of a +1 are much higher. She also has a second ability that when you trigger a climax called Friends to battle alongside with, you can salvage a rapid-firing dwarf or a Banishing Heresy Zuckerburg, which are 2 of our level 3s that use that same climax. Overall, she's a good tool for the deck, super tailored, but great in her niche. So that's our level 0, lots of soul, potential to gain cards, and neat tricks that help us out in cool ways. Let's move up from the level 0 game to see how it supports our level 1 package. Now this one is a little smaller. There's only 6 characters you're really playing out to the field, along with 2 backups and 3 events. Now I want to start with the 1-0 event we talked about earlier, because it kind of acts like another character you can play. When you play Dragon Bones, you rest a character with Zuckerburg in its name, and then you can put a Dragon Tooth Warrior from your hand onto the stage for free. So it's a -1 and a rest, but it obviously combos with the Miracle from Ancestry Lizard. Again, it's a huge body at level 1 that can get up to 12-5 without a climax if you really needed to, and what's more, it has a soul trigger, which again is important to us. So it's a very large body we can play at level 1 if we want to, but it's not our main combo. Let's take a look at that. Pride of a High Elf, Elf Archer. When she's on the stage, players can't play more than one of the same event per turn. Now this is really great in some matchups like Titan, Bang Dream, and Meta Goblin Slayer, where your opponent can't play multiple torches, toilets, or maneuver gears. but that's really not the main draw of this card. When you reverse a battle opponent and you have colorful adventures in your climax zone, you mill 3, then you salvage X order characters where X is the total number of soul triggers milled this way. Now this deck has 17 soul triggers, which is the exact same number as other yellow decks that have had some numbers crunched on them for this particular effect. There's almost a 90% chance you'll hit at least 1 trigger and a 50% chance you'll hit 2, meaning 2 free cards on reverse. Seems pretty good. This is obviously a reason the deck is so heavy on soul triggers, but it's not the only one. But to get to that, we'll have to move right along, so move along, we will. The other front row character we have at level 1 is a generous heavy drinker, Drunken Dwarf. He gives one of your order characters plus 1500 power when he comes in, and when you trigger a shot with his attack, you can salvage a character. Now, it's only for his trigger, not anyone else's. That would be stupid. But he's still pretty good, and a great way to round out our level 1 lineup. He's also really useful for boosting your high elves for your reverse combo, so keep the numbers in mind. Alright, last in the level 1 lineup is our 1/1 2k backup. With the Dragontooth Warrior package, this backup makes them pretty much impossible to reverse, and can really save your high elves. What's more, if all your characters are yellow, it gives you a blind stock, making it basically a 1/1 2k backup with a soul trigger, which from playing standby SAO, I'll tell you is pretty damn nifty. Anyway, let's wrap this part up. Our level 1 toolkit is really interesting, but our level 2 has kind of been bleeding into it this whole time. Let's transition into actually talking about Dragontooth Warrior. Well, there's not much to say since it has no text, but remember, he comes out basically for free at level 1. With our backup and his Zuckerburg combo, he's insanely big and has a soul trigger. What's not to like? And for some unknown reason, this thing is an order character, so all of your effects can grab it, and you will need it in your hand at level 1 if you plan on using the combo, so I'd be a little hesitant about discarding it freely. There is one other level 2 we play, and it's Sure Hit Strike High Elf Archer. She has an empty climax combo that we don't play, but she's an anti-early play that stock kicks. She's there for when you need her, and you can pitch her to other effects when you don't. Simple, simple. Okay, it's time to move on to the top end. So we've got 3 characters here. 2 of them are kind of a package, so let's start with the odd elf out. Natural Adventure High Elf Archer is a good Musashi, meaning that when damage is cancelled the turn she's played, you mill the top card of your deck and deal X+1 damage where X was that card's level. It's a classic and consistent finishing ability. You can also pay an extra 2 stock when she comes in and bounce any level 3 or lower character on your opponent's stage. Now this seems expensive, but when you consider the idea of bouncing a priestess before a minus soul hits, a rider with an active combo, or a Rio bodyguard with reverse burn, it seems pretty worth it. It's a great secondary finisher that gives you an extremely good tool against some problematic cards, so don't underestimate her. Now, this deck has its own primary finishing combo. It's mostly the dwarf, but we also have Mark Zuckerburg in for his final curtain call. He's a 3/2 healer that, when you play the climax Friends to Battle alongside with, brings out the level 3 dwarf from your waiting room to any position of your stage. Since our level 3 is pretty stock heavy, he's a nice way to get a level 3 with 2 soul on the board while still being able to pay for our finishing abilities. It's almost like making our primary finisher a healer on top of everything, but you do have to have the climax first. Interesting, but let's move on to the meat and beer of the combo. Rapid Firing of Pebbles Drunken Dwarf draws 2 and pitches 1 whether you change into him or play him, and then he has the climax combo with Friends to Battle alongside with. When he attacks, you can pay 4 and mill the top 5 cards of your deck. Then you deal 1 damage to your opponent X times, where X is the number of soul triggers you hit on the mill. Again, there's been some math done on this effect in a deck with the same number of soul triggers, and there's an extremely good chance of dealing 1 damage at least 2 times, and that's a very powerful finishing setup. It's obviously meant to mirror the Pebble and Stone spell the dwarf uses in the show, which is pretty neat from a flavor standpoint. It's expensive, sure, but very little in the deck costs stock, and we have a level 0 that really helps us out on that front. Doing this once will require 4 stock, but doing it twice will cost a whopping 10 stock all said and done, so save that stock for your Drunken Dwarf finisher. Because the way this ability is worded is super good. Instead of giving your opponent the ability to cancel a large number of damage at once, this is damage dealt 1 card at a time, making it much harder to survive. Not many cards in the game do this, so it costs a lot for a reason, but it's a really strong finisher, especially if you can do it twice or combine it with Elf Musashis. Never underestimate the Drunken Dwarf's ability to just kill you. So that's the yellow deck, and I just have a few final comments and tips before we close out. First, if you're going to play the Dragon Bones package, don't screw yourself with the Elf Archer, because she'll also stop you from playing 2 Dragon Bones events in 1 turn. Just play your events before you play her. Second, the deck unfortunately has 8 back row level 0s. I don't think it would necessarily be wrong to up the count, but you'll likely sacrifice soul triggers. I think this is probably the biggest drawback of playing the Dragon Bones combo. You'd be forgiven for opting to run it in lesser numbers and going more towards other tech. You'll be very reliant on your runners in your opening if you want to keep your attackers up at 0, but also remember that you can clock yourself up with Mark Zuckerburg if need be. Third, if you opt not to play the Dragon Bones combo in your deck, I'd recommend upping the count of the level 1 Dwarf and adding the level 1 Lizard that can double trigger. I also wouldn't be afraid to splash some off-color zeros for tech, as many decks do. For this deck, Personal Special Reward Priestess is a great choice because it mills and can potentially give you free stock, just like the other Lizard Man. And speaking of that, for my fourth tip, I want to reiterate that this deck has most of its interaction from the waiting room. Discarding things that you'll need later is almost never bad, and you should really do what you can to start moving through your deck as quickly as possible. Kind of related to that, I'll warn you that getting stuck at level 0 really sucks for this version of the deck. Since your Brainstormer is tap 2, moving through your deck after spending too long at level 0 is super difficult in this build. What's more, with the exception of your runner, your level 0s don't have much staying power, and you definitely want at least some of them for their abilities on the stage and on play. My recommendation is to discard aggressively at the opening, not only to hunt for level 0 tools in your level 1 combo, which is the main way to come back from this dilemma, but also to move through your deck that much faster. Finally, the level 3 combo is quite expensive, so spend a good deal of the game building your stock. You'll need 10 if you want to do the Dwarf's effect twice, and that's no easy task. That's playing 2 Dwarves, attacking twice to build stock, and using the second effect on the final attack of the turn. But you can do it, players. I have faith in you. Alright, that was a fun little deck test to kick off our Goblin Slayer series. The yellow Adventurer deck plays pretty different than the rest of Goblin Slayer, so it adds variety to the set. But don't worry, we'll be going into the nitty-gritty of what makes Goblin Slayer tick very soon. Spoiler alert, it's goblins. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.